There are moments in history when a nation needs a hero. This is the story of one of those moments, but it's not the kind of hero story you might expect. This isn't about the strongest warrior or the most experienced general. This is about a frightened young man hiding in a wine press, and how God used his weakness to display divine strength. This is the story of Gideon and his impossible army of 300 men. His name was Gideon, and when we first meet him, he was hiding. For 7 years, the Midianites had terrorized Israel like a plague of locusts. Every harvest season, they would sweep across the land with their camels and tents, destroying everything: crops, livestock, hope. The Israelites had been reduced to living in caves and mountain hideouts, struggling just to survive. And Gideon? He was threshing wheat in a wine press, a pit designed for crushing grapes, not grain. It was the worst possible place to thresh wheat. There was no wind to separate the chaff. But there was something more important than efficiency. It was hidden from view. Gideon wasn't being clever. He was being terrified.
The Lord is with you, mighty warrior.
Mighty warrior? Me? Sir, you must be mistaken.
And with all due respect, if the Lord is with us, why has all this happened to us?
Where are all his wonders that our ancestors told us about? Didn't they say the Lord brought us up out of Egypt?
But now the Lord has abandoned us and given us into the hand of Midian.
Gideon was honest, at least. He didn't pretend to have faith he didn't feel. He didn't mask his doubts with religious platitudes. He told this stranger exactly what he thought. God had abandoned them, and sometimes that kind of honest doubt is the beginning of real faith.
Go in the strength you have and save Israel out of Midian's hand.
Am I not sending you?
Pardon me, my lord, but how can I save Israel?
My clan is the weakest in Manasseh, and I am the least in my family.
I'm nobody. I'm the youngest son of the weakest family in the weakest tribe.
You want me to fight an army that covers the valley like locusts? That's not faith. That's suicide.
I will be with you, and you will strike down all the Midianites together, as if they were one man.
If now I have found favor in your eyes, give me a sign that it is really you talking to me.
Please do not go away until I come back and bring my offering and set it before you.
Gideon needed proof. Not because he was rebellious, but because he was human. He was being asked to risk everything: his life, his family's safety, his people's future, on a conversation with a stranger. So he asked for a sign. He got one. Fire from heaven consumed the offering, and the angel vanished. Gideon suddenly realized he'd been talking to a divine messenger. Fear gripped him. Ancient belief held that seeing an angel meant death.
Alas, sovereign Lord, I have seen the angel of the Lord face to face.
Peace. Do not be afraid, Baal. You are not going to die.
God gave Gideon his first assignment, and it wasn't what anyone expected. Before Gideon could fight external enemies, he had to confront internal compromise. His own father had built an altar to Baal, the false god of the Canaanites. Israel's problem wasn't just Midian, it was their own unfaithfulness. Notice that Gideon did it at night. He was still afraid. Afraid of his father, afraid of the townspeople. But fear didn't stop him. He trembled while he obeyed. And that's real courage, not the absence of fear, but obedience in spite of it.
Who did this? Who destroyed the altar of Baal? It was Gideon, son of Joash.
Bring him out! He must die!
Are you going to plead Baal's cause? Are you trying to save him?
If Baal really is a god, he can defend himself when someone breaks down his altar. If Baal is so powerful, Let him deal with Gideon himself.
Sometimes God gives us unlikely defenders. Joash, who had built the altar, now defended the one who destroyed it, and from that day on, they gave Gideon a new nickname, Jerub-Baal, which means, "Let Baal contend with him." The frightened wheat thresher had become the idol destroyer.
The Midianites, Amalekites, and all the people of the east have joined forces. They've crossed the Jordan and are camping in the valley of Jezreel. Their numbers are like sand on the seashore.
And then something supernatural happened. The Spirit of the Lord came upon Gideon, filling him with divine courage. This wasn't human bravery working itself up. This was God's power flowing into a willing vessel. And Gideon did something he never could have done on his own. He blew a trumpet calling Israel to war. Men came from Manasseh, Asher, Zebulun, and Naphtali. 32,000 warriors answered his call. An army was forming. Gideon stood before them, this unlikely general with his impossible army, facing an enemy that outnumbered them vastly. But God wasn't finished surprising anyone yet. But even with an army behind him, Gideon still struggled with doubt. Was this really God's will? Was he really supposed to lead these men into battle? So he asked God for another sign, one that would seem absurd if we didn't understand his fear.
God, if you will save Israel by my hand, as you have promised.
Look, I will place a wool fleece on the threshing floor. If there is dew only on the fleece and all the ground is dry,
Then I will know that you will save Israel by my hand, as you said.
Morning came. The ground was completely dry, but when Gideon picked up the fleece, he squeezed out enough water to fill a bowl. It should have been enough, but fear has a way of demanding one more proof, one more confirmation.
Do not be angry with me.
let me make just one more request. Allow me one more test with the fleece. This time, make the fleece dry, and let the ground be covered with dew.
God graciously answered again. The fleece was dry, the ground was soaked. God understood what Gideon needed, not because God needed to prove himself, but because Gideon needed his faith strengthened, and now, finally, Gideon was ready. Or so he thought. 32,000 men. It wasn't a massive army compared to Midian's hundreds of thousands, but it was something maybe, just maybe, they could pull off a victory. But then God spoke, and what he said made no military sense whatsoever.
You have too many men.
Israel might boast against me, saying, "My own hand has delivered me."
Now announce to the army, anyone who trembles with fear may turn back and leave Mount Gilead.
22,000 men left. Why 22,000? Just like that, Gideon lost 2/3 of his army. He was now down to 10,000 men facing an enemy that vastly outnumbered them. Any military strategist would have been in despair, but God wasn't finished.
There are still too many men.
Separate those who lap the water with their tongues as a dog laps from those who kneel down to drink.
What was God doing? He was dividing the army based on how they drank water. Those who lapped water from their hands stayed alert, watching for danger. Those who knelt down completely let their guard down, but honestly, both groups would be equally useless if the odds were impossible to begin with.
With the 300 men that lapped I will save you, and give the Midianites into your hands. Let all the others go home.
300. From 32,000 down to 300. The math didn't just fail to add up, it was laughable. It was military suicide, but that was exactly the point. This wasn't going to be about Israel's strength, military strategy, or superior numbers. This was going to be about God and God alone.
Get up, go down against the camp, because I am going to give it into your hands.
If you are afraid to attack, go down to the camp with your servant Purah and listen to what they are saying.
Afterward, You will be encouraged to attack the camp.
Even with all the signs, all the confirmations, Gideon was still afraid. And God, in his kindness, offered one more encouragement. Notice God said, "If you are afraid," not as a rebuke, but as understanding. God knew his chosen warrior was terrified.
I had a dream. A round loaf of barley bread came tumbling into our camp. It struck the tent with such force that the tent overturned and collapsed. This can be nothing other than the sword of Gideon, son of Joash, the Israelite. God has given the Midianites and the whole camp into his hands.
Do you see what happened? God let Gideon hear the enemy's fear. Even the Midianites knew they were doomed. They'd heard about this Gideon, about his God. They were already defeated in their hearts. They just didn't know when the blow would fall.
Get up! The Lord has given the Midianite camp into your hands! Into your hands!
And then Gideon revealed his battle plan, or rather God's battle plan, and it was unlike any military strategy in history.
Watch me! Follow my lead! When I get to the edge of the camp, do exactly as I do. When I and all who are with me blow our trumpets, then from all around the camp blow yours and shout, "For the Lord and for Gideon!"
No swords, no battle plan, no military tactics, just noisemakers and clay pots. If Gideon had presented this plan at a war council, they would have laughed him out of the tent. But these 300 men had been selected by God, and they chose to trust. They divided into 3 companies and positioned themselves around the entire camp. And then they waited. Midnight approached, the darkest, deepest part of the night, when fear feels most real and hope seems most distant. And then chaos erupted.
A sword for the Lord and for Gideon!
The Midianites woke to their worst nightmare. Lights blazing all around them, trumpets blaring from every direction. In the darkness and confusion, they couldn't tell they were only facing 300 men. To their terrified minds, it sounded like 100,000. And then something miraculous happened. God caused the Midianites to turn their swords against each other. In the darkness and confusion, they couldn't tell friend from enemy. The vast army that had terrorized Israel for 7 years began destroying itself. The 300 men didn't chase. They didn't fight. They stood their ground, blowing their trumpets and holding their torches, while God won the battle. This wasn't Israel's victory, it was God's victory, and he made sure everyone knew it. As word spread of what God had done, the men who had been sent home earlier rejoined the pursuit. Israelites from Naphtali, Asher, and all Manasseh chased the fleeing Midianites. What God started with 300, he finished with a nation. The army that had covered the valley like locusts was destroyed. The people who had terrorized Israel for 7 years fled and never returned one night. 300 men, clay jars and trumpets, and a God who specializes in impossible victories.
Rule over us, you, your son, and your grandson, because you have saved us from the hand of Midian.
Success is often more dangerous than failure. In their gratitude, the people wanted to make Gideon king. They wanted to establish a dynasty. It was the ultimate compliment, the highest honor, and it would have been the worst decision Gideon could make.
I will not rule over you, nor will my son rule over you. The Lord will rule over you.
This was Gideon's finest moment, not the victory over Midian, but the victory over his own ego. He understood what many leaders forget. The battle was never about him. The glory belonged to God alone. He had been an instrument, not the source of power. So what does Gideon's story teach us? Why does God want us to remember 300 men with trumpets and torches? First, God often calls the unlikely. Gideon wasn't a warrior. He wasn't confident. He wasn't even particularly faithful at the start. He was hiding in a wine press, doubting God's presence, But God saw something else, a willing heart that could be shaped into a courageous leader. Maybe you feel like Gideon, unqualified, afraid, inadequate. Maybe you're hiding in your own winepress, wondering if God could ever use someone like you. Gideon's story says he can. God doesn't call the equipped. He equips the called. Second, God reduces our resources to increase our faith. He deliberately shrunk Gideon's army from 32,000 to 300. Why? Because when you have enough resources, you trust your resources. But when your resources are laughably inadequate, you have no choice but to trust God. Sometimes God will strip away your backup plans. He'll remove your safety nets. He'll reduce your army to 300 when you need 30,000, not to punish you, but to position you to see Him work. Because when God shows up in your impossibility, there's no mistaking who gets the glory. The third, God's ways are not our ways. If you'd asked any military expert how to defeat the Midianites, not one would have suggested trumpets and clay jars. God's strategies often look foolish by human standards, but God's foolishness is wiser than human wisdom, and God's weakness is stronger than human strength. When God asks you to do something that doesn't make sense, remember Gideon. Sometimes obedience looks illogical. Sometimes faith requires you to blow a trumpet when you want to draw a sword. Sometimes the battle plan is to worship while God fights. You might be facing your own Midianite army right now, an addiction that's controlled you for years, a financial crisis that seems insurmountable, a health diagnosis that terrifies you, a calling that feels impossibly beyond your abilities, and your resources feel about as useful as 300 men with clay pots facing thousands. Here's what Gideon's story tells you. Inadequate resources plus God equals overwhelming victory. Your weakness plus God's strength equals His glory. Your impossibility plus His power equals His testimony. Gideon started as a coward and ended as a deliverer, not because he became brave on his own, but because he learned to let God be strong through his weakness. He asked for signs not because he was faithless, but because he was honest about his faith being small, and God honored that honesty. So here's your challenge. Stop waiting until you feel qualified. Stop waiting until you have enough resources. Stop waiting until the odds look better. Gideon didn't wait for any of those things. He trembled, doubted, asked for multiple confirmations, and then obeyed. Maybe God has already given you your assignment, but you're still hiding in the winepress. Maybe He's already called you to something that terrifies you. Maybe He's stripped away your backup plans and you're down to your 300, and you think it's not enough. But small armies plus a big God always equal victory. Your 300 is exactly what God wants to work with. Your inadequacy is the perfect canvas for His adequacy. Your weakness is the ideal platform for His strength. So pick up your trumpet, light your torch, face your Midianites, and watch what happens when a small army trusts a big God. Because at the end of the day, the question was never, are you strong enough? The question is God strong enough? And Gideon's answer, your answer, is yes, always yes.